Hi, my name is Janae Wheeler, and I'm pleased to be hosting this webinar, Surprising Out-of-Pocket Costs for Caregivers. This webinar is intended to help both the caregiver and the care recipient begin the process of preparing financially and emotionally for the labor of love that is family caregiving. Today, you might be tuning in as a caregiver or thinking about how to proactively plan as a care recipient. AARP has created a guide for you, the financial workbook for family caregivers, to help you through the process of becoming organized, managing expenses, and budgeting. And we'll be referencing this throughout the webinar. Joining us today are two experts in caregiving and personal finance that will help guide our discussions. Catherine Brown has worked at AARP for more than 19 years and is currently a senior advisor on the health and caregiving team, where she helps set the strategic direction of AARP's caregiving initiatives. We also have Lee Baker, who is a certified financial planner and president of Apex Financial Services, a full-service financial planning firm dedicated to helping individuals and businesses achieve their goals. Lee was also a caregiver himself, so this gives him a keen perspective on this topic. Catherine, Lee, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Janae.
Thanks for having me, Janae.
Excellent. So let's get started. Every day, 48 million Americans perform a great labor of love, caring for parents, spouses, adult children with disabilities, friends, and other loved ones so that they can remain in their homes. They manage medications, provide transportation, prepare meals, financial planning, performing essential medical treatment tasks, and much, much more. So who are these family caregivers? Well, would you believe that many people who deliver this care don't actually identify themselves as a family caregiver? For our purposes, a family caregiver is someone who is providing unpaid short-term or long-term care to a parent, spouse, friend, or other adult loved one who needs help with everyday activities and personal tasks. Family caregivers are a diverse group representing every racial, cultural, and socioeconomic demographic. A few statistics might even surprise you. 40% of family caregivers are men. Almost a quarter are millennials, those aged between 28 and 40 years of age. 40% represent multicultural communities, and 60% are family caregivers who are juggling paid work in addition to caregiving. Now, that last point is an important one. Many family caregivers face unexpected disruptions in their work life, and some end up leaving their careers entirely for a period of time to meet their caregiving demands. These disruptions can bring serious economic impacts over the short term and may make it difficult for caregivers to re-enter the workforce over the longer term. Earlier this week, we spoke to Heather, a caregiver from Nashville, who shared her perspective on the demands of caregiving and how to maintain balance in your life while caring for others.
I'm Heather Marriott. I am a disaster case manager in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am a caregiver for my 81-year-old mom. It's difficult to separate the relationship from the finances because they're all intertwined, right? So in her mind, when I came home to take care of her, for her sense of control, her sense of need to be in charge and not be feeling like a burden to me, she needed to feel like she was taking care of me. We're going for financial freedom because my goal is to have this mortgage paid off so that, as like I said, in 2 years, she could be far more probably bedridden as I'm seeing her decline. If I project that forwards into what her needs will be, she's either going to have to go to a full-time nursing home, which I've told her we're going to try to prevent if at all possible, or she's going to need more of my time, balanced with caregivers coming in and out so I can get rest and still keep part-time work. I got to keep my foot in the workplace, or before you know it, you're irrelevant. So, yeah.
That's a great reminder for all of us. And before we turn to our experts, I want to point out that if you'd like to ask a question and get an answer from our specialist on this topic, click on the Your Questions Answered panel. Now, if you don't see the Your Questions Answered panel, click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. Next, click Get Started and then enter a keyword. You'll see a pop-up asking you to confirm your question for submission. A volunteer caregiving specialist will email you an answer within a few days.
Thanks, Janae. Before we dive into our conversation, I have a question to get you all thinking about the expenses of caregiving. How much do you think the average caregiver spends on out-of-pocket expenses related to their caregiving?
Oh, that is a great question indeed. Now, while you all are thinking about that, I want you to take a look at what Heather shared regarding the cost of caregiving.
When I first stepped back into my parents' adult life, they were in tax foreclosure, and the money was sort of everywhere. They had gotten into a financial debacle with a company trying to get them to make money. I won't name the company, but they had a bunch of debt and were really upside down. My dad was a very proud person, so he wouldn't let me know what was going on. So when he passed, I went digging through everything. I went to find all the answers. I had questions, but I didn't have any answers. So I went looking for all those, went through all those documents, and the things that I learned were, if there's not enough money, it's coming out of your pocket. Also, there may be ways to put more money in. So I started looking at, was she getting the right in Social Security, the right amount in Social Security? My dad was a veteran, so I went after the VA aid in attendance, so that increased her income. And then I went after the reverse mortgage to recover the house for both of our sakes, because if she needs equity in the future, it would be gone with a reverse mortgage, right? If she needs that for whatever reason, a mobility ban or whatever pops up, it's gone with a reverse mortgage. So we needed to recover that. So in the very beginning, this affected me financially because I paid off the taxes. I had to pay for the VA aid and attendance attorney. I had to pay for the elder law attorney. I had to pay for, my mom's in very poor health, so she would fall a lot. She's had strokes a lot, and she had terrible insurance when I got here. So it was like this test, that lab test, that emergency transportation, that extra days past the 21 of Medicaid. We're not coming home yet. What do you mean you're not coming home yet? Well, no, that's $185 a day. Well, she's not going to be ready to go home for months. She didn't have the money for that. So it started out with me footing a lot of the things that were falling off the plate until I could figure out how to position her insurance, her finances, and the house in a better way that she was covered in both directions, so it didn't flow over to me. At one point, she fell and was in the hospital and rehab for 3 months and still wasn't ready to come home at the end of rehab. So we had to do assisted living. And here where we live in Nashville, Tennessee, it's like $6,000 a month and she makes $3,200 a month. So yeah, all of a sudden I've got two house payments to make. I was like, wait, what just happened?
We've seen that assessing the financial impact of family caregiving can be difficult, particularly in the hidden costs that can add up over time. According to an AARP study, unpaid family caregivers can expect to spend nearly $7,240 per year for caregiving. If support is provided long distance, those costs will be even higher. There are many types of expenses that can add up. And as you can see here, getting a handle on all of this will enable everyone to plan ahead effectively. For example, the biggest category of out-of-pocket cost come from household expenses such as paying the mortgage and other bills, adding safety equipment to the home, etc. The second largest category is related to medical needs. co-payments for doctors and hospital visits, prescriptions, and cost of trips to and from appointments and other medical expenses. Travel, legal fees, and training costs also add up, as do fees for assisted care and hired companions. Beyond these hard costs, it's important to remember that there is a host of personal and often highly emotional issues that arise among family members regarding caregiving. Difficult discussions and potential disagreements that cloud an already challenging decision-making process. For this reason, AARP is committed to providing our members with the insight, understanding, and importantly, the hands-on tools that family caregivers and care recipients need to navigate the complex responsibilities of caregiving. Lee, you are a caregiver. In your experience, what should we consider when taking on the responsibility of becoming a caregiver?
Well, first, we all need to recognize that becoming a family caregiver, it's a labor of love that comes with a lot of responsibility. It may be hard to put a definitive price on the cost of caregiving, but we really need to try. Now, making a personal budget for yourself and for your care recipient is essential. Start first with your own personal expenses. Then, take a look at the added expenses related to your role as a caregiver.
Now, because creating these budgets can be challenging, I want to remind you that AARP has created the financial workbook for family caregivers to help you through the process of becoming organized, managing expenses, and budgeting. Now, we'll be referencing this guide throughout the webinar, so we hope that everyone tuning in has taken the time to download and print out the workbook. And if not, that's okay. There's a link to the guide in the resource folder.
That's right, Janae. The guide includes a set of worksheets designed to help you capture the essential information caregivers and care recipients need to manage their complex responsibilities. Some aspects of this guide are designed to help caregivers make their own plans, while others are designed to help you and your care recipient. You will also want to fill out a separate worksheet for each person you provide care for, like a partner or spouse. We recognize that taking the time required to fill in all the information can seem overwhelming, but we believe this is an essential first step in developing a realistic plan of action. Completing this step will give you the peace of mind that comes from having a comprehensive view of what you can realistically provide as care to your loved one. Lee, is there anything you'd like to tell our viewers to keep in mind as they fill out the workbook?
Absolutely. We encourage you to use the exercises in the workbook as an opportunity to have important conversations with your immediate family, your loved one, and anyone else that may live with them, others in your extended family, and to do so before a crisis occurs. We strongly suggest that you make a copy of the completed guides, give it to a trusted relative or friend in the event that circumstances change for either you or your care recipient down the road.
That's great advice, Lee. Finally, while this workbook is designed to help you capture the essential information you need to manage the complex responsibility of caregiving, AARP and other organizations supporting family caregivers have additional resources to help you. We have listed a number of them in the back of the guide.
Yes, Catherine. And the workbook and the guided activities are extremely helpful. We'll be referencing this workbook throughout the entire webinar. So again, please take a moment to download it and print it out. Now, if you want to receive a hard copy of this workbook, you can call 888-333-5885. Again, that's 888-333-5885. And you'll want to ask for publication D as in Delta 20613. Now, if you're a caregiver for a veteran, a service member, or a military-involved family member, you'll want to receive a special version for you. So be sure to request publication D 20616. We've already covered a lot of ground, so let's all just take a deep breath. Now, if you have the workbook downloaded, please pull it up now. And if you don't have it yet, we'll actually take a minute here for you to download or pull out your printed version of the workbook. All right, welcome back. First up is estimating out-of-pocket cost. This is perhaps the most important area to get a handle on, and the one area that will likely require a lot of time for both caregivers and loved ones. These out-of-pocket expenses likely include healthcare insurance coverage, housing, transportation, personal care expenses, and much more. Next, we'll tackle budgeting for success. Once you're armed with the critical cost-based information required to make informed, realistic decisions, the next step is to incorporate all this data into practical budgets, one for you and for your loved one. And then we'll help you align the two. So let's walk through the worksheets and learn more from Lee and Catherine as they reveal some tried and true methods that they can offer for handling all of the issues related to expenses and budgeting. Lee?
The best place to start when estimating out-of-pocket costs is gathering everything about your care recipient's health insurance, and that's listed on pages 6 and 7 of the guide. Then gather their primary coverage policy as well as any secondary coverages. Use the policies themselves as the source of this information. Note things like provider names, member numbers, contacts, and copay amounts. Include copays for specialist coverage. Make a note of annual deductibles as well as any caps on coverage. Now next, we'll want to list any existing health issues and any other conditions. Any medications taken by your loved one on a regular basis as well. Include any equipment your care recipient uses, things like a wheelchair, walker, hearing aids, and the like. Make sure you get emergency contact information for anyone other than you who might be in a position to help should something arise and you are not immediately reachable. If there are any other factors pertaining to the care recipient's health insurance, medical conditions, and contacts, get that information as well. This is a big step in estimating out-of-pocket costs so that you can do your best to plan and not deplete your savings or personal income too quickly. Recently we spoke with more caregivers to hear about the importance of planning and how costs change over time.
Leslie Mariscal.
My name is Mario Munoz.
My mom came to live with me when my dad passed away. I guess I didn't really consider myself a caregiver for her until probably the last 4 months, I would say, of her life. And I would say some of the surprises that came along with that were the amount of care that she needed, the expenses that came along with it, the amount of help that I needed.
We often fail to anticipate things. As our parents get older, we don't plan ahead, and we think that time is not gonna get there, and we procrastinate. If we were able to anticipate, we could do a lot of the things, and I think that's the takeaway for me.
That would be a really strong piece of advice that I would give to people, and that we do give to people that have elderly parents, is to plan ahead and look for resources, and especially if you know where your parents are financially. If they didn't have life insurance, if they don't have a home, if they don't have the financial resources to care for themselves, that's very important, because now you have to figure out how are you going to pay for their care. I'm pretty good at handling the financial part of it. I would say it was a little difficult kind of getting through the minutia of going through the applications of like the Medicare and the trying to figure out all her what she was entitled to and wasn't entitled to, and that was kind of confusing, but once we got through it, and all that has to be done, like you said, you have to give yourself time, so that applications, and then we were doing it through COVID, when when you were dealing with people that were
At home.
working from home.
That is an excellent perspective and advice. Let's now move on to your loved one's housing situation now, which is on pages 19 through 21, which are significant expenses to put into your budget. Lee, would you say it's important for caregivers to note whether they own or rent?
Yeah, if they own their home, you'll want to know if it's paid off or if they still carry a mortgage, the mortgage holder, the monthly payment amount, and when every payment is due. You'll want to know whether they pay the mortgage themselves or if you or someone else pays all or part of it. Now, if they rent, answer these same questions. Pull out your care recipient's homeowners or their rental insurance policy. Log the account number, the amount of the payment, when the payment is made, whether you or anyone else helps pay for this coverage. Do the same thing for property taxes if your care recipient owns their home. And finally, you'll want to list all utilities your care recipient pays. Things like power, water, cable, any other regular bills for services such as lawn care or house cleaning.
That's a lot to gather, Lee. Thanks for being so specific here. In most cases, you can usually use your monthly bills to gather the information you need. Be sure to note whether those bills fluctuate, if they are averaged or changed month to month. Here on page 22 and 23, we find room for you to note how your care recipient gets around. Do they still drive, own a car? If so, you'll want to gather specific information and documents regarding car ownership, registration, insurance alike. Here's where you will also need to log in their driver's license number and renewal date. Getting an estimate of gas and maintenance costs will also be important, including any regular scheduled maintenance plans they may have.
And if they use public transportation or rideshare services, which ones? Are there bus or route numbers that they typically use? Write those down here as well. Now note, if you or anyone else shares the cost of any of these expenses as well.
Before we move to the budgeting process, it is important to pull together all the documents we've been referring to so far for each of you. Insurance policies, legal documents, passports, and any other records listed on page 25. And don't forget to include passwords for any accounts either you or your loved one uses online. As you pull documents together, create copies for safekeeping and note where each is located.
Now, Catherine, that's a lot of sensitive information. Would it make sense to consolidate the location in maybe a fireproof safe or a safety deposit box that each of you and your loved one and even your backup can access when necessary?
Yes, that's a great piece of advice and a good place to dig into our second topic, budgeting for success. To start, let's hear from Heather and her experience with budgeting.
So the other thing that I learned is just that there's power in numbers, right? So we could achieve a whole lot more financially by combining our finances. And I think it's kind of been the opposite of some of the advice is, run, hide, shovel it, stick it under the carpet. And we have found that we've been much more successful together with combined goals. I constantly keep budgets. I would lose my marbles without my budgets. I know I set as many things on auto pay as I can. I make sure that I know when the money's coming in, when it's going out, and I try to do as much autopilot as I can. And then the saving and the payoffs, and just kept plugging.
We have heard very similar stories such as this, so it might be a good time to pause and reflect. It all may seem overwhelming, but that's okay. There's a lot to think about and pull together. Give yourself a break and recognize this isn't a one-day task by any means. Now, we come to the heart of the matter. How to use all the information you've gathered, documented, and stored to make detailed, realistic budgets for both the caregiver and care recipient. Now, let's be clear. Managing money, both yours and your care recipients, is perhaps the most important responsibility in the broad spectrum of caregiving or receiving care. These budgets will be approximations. Some expenses change from month to month. This tool will help you understand the overall cash flow for each of you and spot any gaps that could deplete your savings or accumulate debt.
That's great, Lee. And remember that in addition to this guide, AARP has created and compiled a wide range of easy-to-use money management tools for older adults and caregivers, which you can find on our budget and saving pages 28 through 30. We have created 3 budget worksheets here on page 28 through 30. One to plan for the caregiver's overall income and expenses, another one to plan for your caregiving income and expenses, and one to track your care recipient's income and expenses. As you create these budgets, we encourage you to remember 3 helpful tips. The first, list every expense, not just major bills. Then calculate all income from all sources and document exact expenses where possible.
As we mentioned earlier, start with your own budget if you don't already have one. If you do have a detailed monthly budget, we encourage you to look this section over to see if there are any items you may have missed. Begin by listing your income, which should include any monies you may receive other than your salary. List all your expenses, just like you did for your care recipient. Include every expense, no matter how small. Little costs can add up. Now, don't forget to include credit card payments and other debt payments such as student loans. Now that you have a budget for your own income and expenses, we'll need you to document those additional expenses that you have pertaining to your caregiving. Be sure to include mileage, the cost of gas related to visits, and trips you make on your care recipient's behalf. Include any cost of their care you contribute to. Do the same for your care recipient. Be sure to add in what they typically spend on groceries, gas, entertainment, and any other discretionary spending. Lastly, let's review how you account for investments and debts. Investments and debts can play a big role in budgeting. Take a good look at your investments, savings habits, and outstanding debts, especially high interest rate debt like credit card balances. Be sure to include bank account information as well as both checking and savings.
And Catherine, you should do the same for your loved one, right?
Yes, definitely. Great point. And once you've done all this, consider changing your investments and debt reduction plans for the better. AARP has other tools listed at the end of the workbook to help you get your house in order in this respect. We've talked a lot about the here and now, but what about the future? What are your plans? Do you want to pursue additional education, a college degree, or another degree perhaps? Are there hobbies, trips, or other new experiences that you'd like to plan for? And what about your care recipient? Do they have any bucket list items you'd like to check off? You can use the brief forms here at the end of the workbook to start considering what's next for the both of you.
That's really helpful. I want to give a sincere thank you, Lee and Catherine, for you both being here and sharing your expertise and guiding us through this process.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. This was a very helpful discussion.
Now, before we sign off, here's a short reminder about our workbook, Financial Workbook for Family Caregivers.
Hi there, my name is Jessica Allen and I'm an accredited financial counselor. Every day, millions of Americans perform a great labor of love, caring for spouses, parents, adult children with disabilities, friends, and other loved ones. To help you be prepared as a caregiver, AARP has designed a guide called Financial Workbook for Family Caregivers. This workbook will help you through the process of becoming organized, managing expenses, and budgeting for you and your loved ones. If you want a hard copy of the workbook, call 888-333-5885 and ask for publication D20613. And if you are caring for a veteran, service member, or military-involved family member, we have a special version just for you. Simply request D20616. Bye!
Every caregiving journey is unique, and you are not alone. I encourage you to use the tools and resources available to you. As we close, let's hear again from our caregivers on the resources they recommend.
I took care of her Medi-Cal years before. I think someone had told me that I should apply for her. I don't remember why. Someone, again, word of mouth, talking to people, you need to talk to people who have elderly parents. And so I applied for her. Not that she needed it at the time because we didn't use it for 3 years, but I applied for her and we just kept it up just in case she might need it someday, which she did end up needing it, her last year. The next thing that I applied for her when she did get ill in her last year, which again, we didn't know it was going to be her last year. You never do. But when she came to live with us, I applied for in-home supportive services through the county. And that I had to do during COVID. And that was a struggle.
And I want to say that's the biggest part. That's where it's going to help you deal with the caregiving, getting the resources, like she said, getting the resources that actually people are entitled to, which a lot of people don't know that.
Wow, that's really great advice. As we mentioned earlier, all of the information and websites mentioned during this program are located in the resources folder. Be sure to check out our newest resource, the Caregiving Out-of-Pocket Cost Study. And if you'd like to ask a question and get an answer from our specialists on this topic, click on the Your Questions Answered panel. AARP also provides lots of opportunities to connect with your community and one another without leaving your home. To try virtual offerings like movie watch parties, coffee chats, and exercise classes, visit aarp.org/near-you. This webinar will be available on demand using the same link you used to log into the event. Or you can click on the link you receive in the thank you email following this event. I hope that you all have enjoyed this program and learned something new to help you in your caregiving journey. We ask you to please share your feedback with us in our brief survey. It will automatically appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. Please tell us how we're doing. Your feedback helps inform future webinars. I'm Janae Wheeler. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next time.